Okay, thank you. Good evening, everybody. I'd like to welcome members, officers, and members of the public to this extraordinary meeting of the Council. Before the meeting starts, can I ask the committee member and scrutiny officer to update you on the systems being used? Rob.
Good evening. If a member wishes to speak, they should use the speak button located on the microphone unit. The microphone will light up green and the chair will be alerted of your request to speak. When the chair invites you to speak, your microphone will be made live and will turn red, at which point you can speak. The normal procedure rules in respect to debate and times to speak will apply. Voting. Voting at tonight's meeting will use both the electronic voting system and a manual roll call of members. The process will be explained at the start of the meeting and ahead of the vote. In the event of a tied vote, the chair will have the casting vote. Are there any questions before we start the meeting? Doesn't look like it, so I will hand back to the chair.
Thank you, Robbie. I'm sure there'll be plenty of questions as we go along. Apologies for absence. We've received apologies from councillors Claire Billing, David Barnard, Rona Cameron, Ruth Clifton, Claire Strong, Tamsin Thomas, Elizabeth Dennis, Stuart Willoughby and Val Bryant. Are there any other apologies? Nope. There has been no other business advised. So we've got the usual announcements plus a few extra. A recording. In accordance with council policy, this meeting is being live streamed and recorded. The recordings will be available on both the council's YouTube page as well as the council's ModGov site alongside the documents from this meeting. A climate and ecological emergency. Members are reminded that this council has declared both a climate emergency and an ecological emergency. These are serious decisions and mean that as these are emergencies, all of us, officers and members, have that in mind as we carry out our various roles and tasks for the benefit of our district. More details are included on the agenda front sheet. Declarations of interest. Members are reminded to make declarations of interest before an item. The detailed reminder about this and speaking rights is set out under the chair's announcements on the agenda. Debate procedure. Here we go. Please can I remind you that the normal procedure rules in respect of debate and times to speak will apply. No speeches may be made after the mover has moved a motion and explained the purpose of it until the motion has been seconded. When seconding a motion or amendment, a member may reserve their speech until later in the debate. In accordance with the Constitution, please can members ensure that no speech exceeds 3 minutes without the consent of the chair. Comfort break. For the purposes of clarification, 4.8.23a of the Constitution does not apply to this meeting. Therefore, a member may leave the room during the debate in consideration of that item and be able to vote. However, please be mindful of the business on the agenda and wherever possible, leave at an appropriate point in the proceedings. I will announce a comfort break at an appropriate time in the meeting should proceedings continue at length. Section 106 Task and Finish Group Consultation. There is an ongoing Task and Finish Group looking at developer contributions. As part of this work, a survey has been shared with all parish council clerks. Please could all members encourage parish councils within their respective wards to respond to the consultation before the 20th of November. Polling district review. A consultation has commenced regarding an interim review of the polling districts and polling places following the community governance review. While the review focuses on changes arising from the 2025 community governance review, Baldock, Bygrave, Clothall, Ickleford and Royston, comments on any aspect of the polling arrangements throughout the district are welcome. Please ensure that you submit your comments to the consultation, which is open until the 30th of November. Or if you have any questions or comments, please direct these to the Electoral Services Manager. Full council will be designating the polling places at their meeting in January. A reminder for members that this year's Youth Democracy Day will be taking place on Thursday, the 20th of November from 9:30 a.m. and all members are encouraged to attend. Please speak to the committee services team if you have any questions about the day. This November, we're proud to be supporting White Ribbon Day for the second time since becoming accredited in November last year. The White Ribbon campaign aims to engage men and boys to prevent violence against women and girls. As part of our commitment and to celebrate this year's theme, We Speak Up, we're hosting a white ribbon pledge event, and we'd love for you to get involved. We'll be creating a pledge tree where you can write and pin your personal pledge to help end gender-based violence. Whether it's a promise to challenge harmful attitudes, support someone in need, or just to take the white ribbon promise, every pledge makes a difference. This will take place on Tuesday, the 25th of November from 1 p.m. in the canteen at the council offices. And to raise awareness and funds, we'll also be holding a bake sale at the same time. Come along and enjoy an afternoon sweet treat and support a great cause after making your pledge. On to the business. Public participation. We have a member of the public registered to speak at tonight's meeting, Mr. Ben Smithson, who will be speaking on item 5, local government reorganisation submission for Hertfordshire. And as we're about to go into that, can I please invite Mr. Ben Smithson to present? Welcome. Good evening.
Thank you. I'd like to start by thanking the council and everyone involved for the enormous amount of work that must have gone into developing and assessing the different options for the local government reorganisation. I'm sure there are a lot of strong views in the room, and you'll be relieved to know I don't have a strong preference for any of the options in terms of the trade-off between savings and local representation, and I'm sure others are going to come on and cover that better than me anyway. In fact, ideally, I'd like to not engage with this at all, safe in the knowledge that all services will be unaffected or improved under any option. However, under one of these options, I can see that clearly won't be the case for my area, so I wanted to make sure the council are aware of the negative impact the modified boundaries of the 4-unitary proposal will have on my community. I live in Ashwell in Arbury Ward, one of the wards proposed to move to East Herts along with Royston and Weston and Sandon. I understand this is to balance populations, but the way the boundary's been drawn removes any benefits of local government reorganisation for our ward. The main arguments for the 4-unitary model seem to be it's more aligned with geography and it will provide more local representation. But that is not true for our ward. The leader of the council, Councillor Allen, recently said to the Local Democracy Reporting Service, if you look at St Albans and Dacorum, they're separated in the 3-unitary option. That makes no sense whatsoever because those two areas look to each other. I agree. I agree completely that communities should not be separated by the new unitaries. In Ashwell, we look to Baldock. My address is Ashwell Baldock. We have a road into Baldock. Our children go to secondary school in Baldock. We use various other services and leisure activities there. Baldock is part of our identity, as acknowledged by this council, which includes Arbury Ward in its Baldock and Villages Community Forum. But the proposed boundary splits us off from Baldock and moves us into East Herts when people rarely travel there, don't have connections there due in part to the road layout. So the 4-unitaries model doesn't reflect the physical geography. And it also leaves us worse off in terms of local representation. For example, Baldock is expanding ever closer to our villages, but in a different unitary, we'd lose our seat at the table to influence how that affects us. We have a thriving community in the village that we're really proud of. People of all ages come together to run clubs and events and support local businesses and each other, but that's all underpinned by being connected to the A1 towns, particularly Baldock. As an example, I'll talk about education. That's the area I know most about. I've got 2 young children, but I'm sure similar applies in other areas as well. Currently, our villages are in the priority area for Knights Templar School and have been for decades. Our primary school has strong links with Knights Templar, transitions handled well, but without being in the priority area for Knights Templar, we wouldn't get into the school on distance alone. We're rural and we're further away. Our next nearest secondary phase school in East Herts is 10 miles away and people have no connection to it. Not only that, but it operates a 3-tier system, as do the other closest schools in East Herts and Royston, whereas we're primary and secondary. Theoretically, children could be educated in a different authority, but that feels unlikely in our case. We're too far away from any school to get in, and the central unitary looks like it'll struggle enough for funding to educate the children who live there, let alone others. If we no longer have access to Knights Templar, that's a significantly worse school experience for our children. Families will leave. That's not a hypothetical. People have said so on the school run, and it's something I would have to reluctantly consider myself. And the community falls apart. Businesses fail, and a thriving rural village becomes another story of rural isolation. The proposed new boundaries under the 4-unitary proposal create losers where there don't need to be any, and those losers are the 3,000 residents of Arbury Ward. I think it was worth exploring the possibility of 4 unitaries. I'm grateful it has been investigated, but it seems to me that if an option can't be found with balanced populations that creates viable unitary authorities and preserves local communities, then it needs to be ruled out. I'm therefore asking you as our council to reject the 4 unitaries option in its current form. Further to that, I note that Dacorum Council are recommending in the event that the 3 unitary options chosen, they'll write to the Secretary of State requesting that the boundaries change, as under that option they have a similar situation where communities are being divided. Is there any reason why this council can't do the same for the 4 unitary option to ensure that it works for all of our residents? Thank you all again for your time.
Thank you very much. Are there any points of clarification from members for Mr. Smithson? Councillor Daniel Allen. Daniel.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation. It's really good. What I would like to point out is that at the moment, we don't know how schools are going to work. There's nothing that says that if you are in one area, you won't be able to go to school in another area. A perfect example at the moment is Great Ashby, where all the people go to school in Stevenage, which is in a different area. However, one thing I would like to point out with this is at the moment, when the application for the 4 unitary goes in, it will go in on the existing area of North Hertfordshire with a recommendation that then there is a boundary review which would review where things are, at which point residents would be able to get involved with the boundary review. At the moment, when the presentation goes through, yes, the recommendation is for AU, which is with those areas moved, but it will currently be going to government on the existing boundaries of North Herts, at which point there will then be a request for a boundary review. Thank you.
Okay, I get that as clarification. It wasn't a question for Mr. Smithson. Are there any other points? No, in which case, thank you, Mr. Smithson, very much for your contribution this evening. Feel free to go and sit in the public gallery at the back and stay for the whole meeting should you wish. Okay, we get on to item 5. Well, the item of the evening, in fact. Local government reorganisation submission for Hertfordshire. Full Council's role this evening is to debate the matter and pass an indicative resolution expressing a preferred option. This provides Cabinet with valuable insight into the views held across the authority and ensures all members can contribute. Cabinet is required to give due regard to any resolution passed by Full Council, but it cannot be legally bound by that resolution. The law requires Cabinet members to reach their own decision lawfully and independently based on the evidence and advice available at the time of the Cabinet meeting. Cabinet members may participate in the debate this evening and may express a lawful preference, but they cannot commit in advance to follow Full Council's resolution. Doing so would amount to unlawful predetermination, which would compromise the validity of the Cabinet's decision. I fully recognise that some members may feel that a decision of this scale and significance should rest with Full Council. However, the statutory framework does not allow for that. Following this approach that we're doing this evening protects the lawfulness of the Council's decision and avoids the risk of challenge, as has occurred elsewhere when incorrect processes were followed. It also ensures that members' views are properly heard, formally recorded and considered, while respecting the statutory boundaries within which we must operate. Dual Hatter county and district members may participate in the debate this evening and may express a lawful preference without unlawful predetermination at the county debate. To state the obvious, tonight's debate is to inform the approach of North Herts Council and should be from that perspective. County councillors will have the opportunity to debate from a county perspective at a separate meeting of Herts County Council next Wednesday, the 19th of November. In order to ensure that the Council can meet the required deadline for submissions of Friday, the 28th of November, I have agreed that the Cabinet decision on this item is urgent and therefore not subject to call-in. The formal notice of this, including reasons for urgency, has been published on the Council's website. I'm now going to ask Anthony Roach to present. Anthony.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. What's in front of you, several hundred pages worth, is the culmination of many months' worth of work from a lot of people across all of the Hertfordshire authorities. And I'm extremely grateful to all those who have contributed and want to pass on my thanks to them. You will appreciate that this amount of work has had a significant impact on workloads and will continue to do so for the next few years as we continue down this journey. I think it's worth acknowledging that the Hertfordshire authorities have stayed together. We have been discussing different views as to what the preferred outcome should be, but we have worked together to produce a single submission with 3 options for a 2-unitary model, a 3-unitary model, and a 4-unitary model. I'm currently unaware of any other areas that have managed to do that, and I think that's to great credit of all of those that have taken part. And the strength of those relationships that we've continued to build will help us with the next stages. Government set us this exam question of what the future structure in Hertfordshire should look like, and it is fair to say some would have preferred that they hadn't. However, as with any challenge, there are a lot of opportunities if we choose to take them around modernisation, service delivery, removing district and county silos by bringing services together, for example, social care and housing, and by resetting our relationship with our communities, amongst many other potential benefits. It's also worth acknowledging that there is no correct answer to the exam question we've been set. Different people will have different views as to the most important factors, and that will lead to different answers to the question. All 3 options have advantages and disadvantages to them, and also worth reflecting that different options may suit different parts of Hertfordshire better. What works best for the southwest may not work best for the east, and vice versa. We believe that we have produced a submission with 3 options that meet all the government criteria, with 3 options that could provide a step change in how we deliver services for our communities. Underpinning this is a shared vision, absolutely, shared vision and ambitions that are set out in section 8.5 in the report. The 6 criteria government established to judge the submissions are set out at 7.3 in the covering report. All those criteria are equally weighted. MHCLG officials have said that all options that are deemed to meet the criteria will be put to the public in the statutory consultation that is penciled in to take place next year. Whilst the recent Surrey decision was heavily influenced by the finances, as it was always going to be due to the level of debt being carried across the Surrey authorities, MHCLG have been at pains to say that it should not be taken as an indication of future decisions elsewhere. The submission and the 3 mini proposals are as accurate and as evidence-based as possible given the time period set by government. They are necessarily based on a set of assumptions, and much of the detail has not been worked up yet. For example, specific delivery models for specific services, as explained in paragraphs 8.8 onwards in the covering report. This work will continue to evolve, recognising that some of these decisions will be for the new unitaries to make in the future. Members will be aware that during September there was community engagement on the options, and this is set out within the submission document and summarised in the covering report at 8.14 and 8.15. The positive aspect of the feedback was that it very much reflected the conversations that were already taking place with officers and members, and there were no surprises. The focus of the report and the submission is local government reorganisation. There is mention of the devolution ambition for Hertfordshire. However, MHCLG have made clear that this is a separate process. As set out in paragraph 7.9, we collectively sent a letter to the Secretary of State just over a week ago, which is available on the Herts County Council website for those that have not yet seen it. At the time I wrote the report, I didn't have the link available. So if anyone hasn't seen it and would like it, drop me an email and I can send you the link to that letter. As yet, there has been no government commitment to a particular timeline for devolution in Hertfordshire, so we have asked that it progress in parallel to local government reorganisation, and we await a response to that. Irrespective of the final decision by the Secretary of State next year, all councils through the Herts Leaders Group have committed to working together to implement that decision, and there is a statement to that effect in the submission document. To that end, as explained in paragraph 8.16, work is already underway on the transition programme, looking at what we can do and what we need to do before the government decision in July next year. Between that point and the Shadow Authority elections in May 27, next phase then being between the Shadow Authority election and vesting day on 1st of April 28, and then from 1st of April 28 onwards. As this programme is developed, we will keep staff and councillors informed, as well as the public when it's relevant for them. I absolutely recognise the importance of this subject to all members, which is why we are having the debate and indicative vote tonight. As just explained by the chair, members will be aware that the decision as to which the North Herts preferred option will be taken at Cabinet next week. At that point, Chair, I think probably best to wrap up my introductory remarks, but more than happy to answer any questions that councillors may have. Thank you.
Thanks, Anthony. Right. Do members at this point have any questions? I don't see any forthcoming. So for the vote on the recommendations, we will debate both recommendations together. However, we will take each vote separately. The vote on recommendation 2.1 will be taken in the usual way, electronically. However, for 2.2, the vote will be conducted via a manual roll call of members. So the recommendations. 2.1, that Council notes the content of this report and the draft Hertfordshire submission document at Appendix A, which forms the proposed collective submission to Government on local government reorganisation. Recommendation 2.2, that Council indicates its support for a preferred option to be considered by Cabinet as part of its deliberations on the 19th of November. And that's A, submit the proposal and identify the 2 unitary option as preferred. B, submit the proposal and identify the modified 3 unitary option as preferred and request that the Secretary of State formally modify the proposal by agreeing boundary changes as set out in the proposal. C, submit the proposal and identify the modified 4 unitary option as preferred and request that the Secretary of State formally modify the proposal by agreeing boundary changes as set out in the proposal. Or D, submit the proposal without identifying a preferred option. So I think Laura Williams, can I have a proposer? Laura.
Yes, I'd like to propose the motion.
Okay, thank you very much. And a seconder, please. Daniel Allen.
I'd like to second and reserve my right. Thank you.
Okay. We're going to debate. I remind you that it's 3 minutes per member. And can we play under the rules of just a minute? So that's try and avoid deviation, repetition or hesitation. Who's first? And I've got David Chalmers in the frame.
Okay. So this evening we are asked to consider the future shape of local government in Hertfordshire, one of the most significant decisions any of us will take. And from a Liberal Democrat perspective, our responsibility is clear. We must choose the model that provides clarity, stability, and the best value for our residents. The 2 unitary option delivers exactly that. It offers simplicity with clear lines of accountability. It offers financial resilience with organisations large enough to sustain vital services such as adult social care, children's services and housing. And crucially, it provides a structure that can support the long-term ambitions of our communities in North Hertfordshire. During consultation, residents told us that they want less duplication, fewer layers, and a system that is easier to understand. They want public money spent on services, not bureaucracy. And the 2 unitary model is the one that best reflects those views. By contrast, the 3 and particularly the 4 unitary options take us in exactly the wrong direction. They replicate senior structures, duplicate statutory functions, and require more systems, more offices, more disaggregation, and more transition cost. It is quite simply bureaucracy by multiplication. And from a Lib Dem standpoint, when residents are struggling with so many costs, spending millions more than necessary on extra layers of management is indefensible. Our duty is to protect the public purse, not inflate it with unnecessary complexity. The 4 unitary proposal in particular would lead us with smaller, less resilient councils, just at the moment when financial and workforce pressures are intensifying. It fragments natural communities, weakens stability, and risks years of upheaval rather than years of delivery. By contrast, the 2 unitary model strengthens our government structure. It builds 2 coherent authorities able to plan strategically, invest in prevention and deliver integrated services. It positions Hertfordshire to work effectively with partners like the NHS, police and skills providers. And it gives the strongest platform for a future county-wide mayoral strategic authority, unlocking devolved funding that fragmented models would struggle to secure. And for North Hertfordshire, it keeps our communities together and protects our voice. It also retains and enhances the essential role of town and parish councils, community forums, neighbourhood partnerships, and local government engagement structures. These bodies provide the local insight, the democratic access and community leadership that residents rely on. And a two-unitary model, their role strengthens, not weakens, as they become key partners in shaping services at neighbourhood level. This is a moment to focus on what truly matters, a structure that provides services, delivers value for money, and reflects what residents in North Hertfordshire told us. Two unitaries mean clarity, stability, and stronger public services. 3 and 4 mean fragmentation, duplication, and avoidable costs. For our residents, for our communities, and for a system that works with local voices, not against them, I urge Council to support the two-unitary model. Thank you.
Brilliant timing. Well done. Councillor Amy Allen. Amy.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, 1 second. There we go. LGR has been coming up a lot in conversation when I've been at events, running community cafes, at governors' meetings, residents' meetings, and even in my day job. And what's said, or very strongly alluded to, is that people are worried about this level of change. They're sceptical about the cost savings ever reaching their own purse, and they're worried these mergers could have a negative impact on the quality of services they receive. It's why I imagine the resident survey came back preferring a 4-unitary option. And I agree with them. Because for me, 4 unitary councils mean keeping decision-making local, keeping accountability close, and keeping our identity intact. We know Hertfordshire isn't one homogenous place. North Herts is not the same as Watford or Dacorum or East Herts. We have different challenges, different priorities, different communities. The 4-unitary model recognises that. It gives us councils that are large enough to deliver the big complex services, but small enough to stay connected to the people they serve. We've all seen what happens when decision-making drifts too far away from communities. Services become standardised, not shaped. Local issues get lost in bigger conversations. Residents start to feel that change is something done to them, not with them. A 4-unitary model offers the best of both worlds, the efficiency of simplification, but without erasing local voices that make Hertfordshire what it is. It's not about clinging to the old ways of doing things. It's about doing change well. Reform that's thoughtful, not rushed. Change that strengthens services instead of hollowing them out. And frankly, I trust the instinct of our residents. They know their communities best. They've looked at the options and said, we want smaller, more local, more accountable councils. So when I vote for the 4-unitary model tonight, I voted for a Hertfordshire that stays rooted in its communities, delivers services efficiently, and never forgets who it's here to serve, people who live and work here. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. Councillor Ruth Brown. Ruth.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd really like to put on record my thanks to everyone who's worked on this huge document, which has got an incredible amount of detail in. And just to say, I wish we weren't here, but we are. I know how much time is being spent by members and by officers right across this county, in every single district and borough and in the county council. And I wish we could spend that time on delivering services rather than on reorganising ourselves. However, we have to engage with this process, so let's get the best out of it. And I think there are opportunities for greater coordination, for making efficiencies, and for improving services. Anthony alluded to one. I would just mention waste collection is done by districts, waste disposal is done by county. It would be really good if that was done by one authority. So there are areas where we could make improvements. And I think the key things for residents is service delivery, financial sustainability, and representation. Just to deal with what Amy's just said about representation, the feedback we got was from 587 North Herts residents, and 390 expressed an interest in a preference for a model, 151 for 4, 144 for 2. We have 1,000 residents in North Herts, so this is hardly representative. So I'm going to be supporting the 2-unitary option. And the reason I'm going to be supporting that is because it's the simplest, the least disruptive. We have enough disruption in reorganising as it is. We need to make it as straightforward as possible. It also allies with partnerships with police and health. It's the most financially sustainable, and it delivers the same number of councillors and representation as 3-unitary authorities. The problems I see with the 4-unitary authorities is the financial deficit that Central will already, which most of North Herts would be part of, would start with a 22 million deficit. That's not sustainable. We can't assume the government will bail us out. I would hate to be in that position as a councillor leading that authority. There's also complexity of disaggregation of services in that model. And it involves boundary changes, as we've also heard from our speaker tonight. And one of those boundary changes would affect Royston. And in the report, it talks about the A10 corridor. Now, I'm not quite sure what the A10 corridor is, but you can't travel it by active travel very easily. And there's a bus to Buntingford from Royston every 2 hours, and there's a Herts Links bus. So, you know, the Royston A10 corridor depends on the private car, which I think is something we want to go away from. We've just heard about our climate emergency, so it doesn't work with that. The railway goes west, goes up to Cambridge and then west to Baldock, Letchworth and Hitchin. And obviously I've come by rail tonight, as I normally do. So in conclusion, all the models will involve larger areas than the current ones. The 2 unitary will have more resources and capacity to set up neighbourhood area committees and strengthen town and parish councils. It will be the most cost effective, and it aligns best with police, health and planning partnerships. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. Councillor Sadie Billing. Sadie.
Thank you, Chair. For me, this all comes down to people. Local government only really works when it feels local, when residents know who represent them, and when council still feels close enough to listen and respond. That's why the 4 model approach makes sense. When you look at a 2 unitary option, the areas are still too big. It might make the system simpler on paper, but it doesn't reflect how different our communities really are. What works for one part of the county might not suit another, and residents could end up feeling disconnected from decision makers who are too far removed from everyday life. 3 unitaries start to bring things closer to home, but there's still a risk that local voices get lost as priorities complete across such wide areas. The 4 model structure, though, gives us the balance we need. It's small enough to keep that personal connection, to know the communities we're serving, but big enough to share resources, plan strategically, and deliver services efficiently. It supports the personalisation of services because it allows councils to shape support around the realities of local life. Each area can focus on what matters most, whether that's transport in rural areas, housing, growth, or community well-being, and still work together on the things that benefit everyone. This approach keeps decision-making close to the residents. People will still recognise their council, still know who's to contact, and still feel that local pride and accountability. That's how trust is built, by being visible, responsive, and rooted in place. The 4 model option protects that while giving us the resilience and efficiency needed to deliver the best for our communities. It's not about change for the sake of change. It's about creating something that works for people, not just on paper. It keeps us connected, and it keeps us accountable, and it keeps local government truly local. Thank you.
Thanks, Sadie. Councillor Paul Ward. Paul.
Chair, the financial picture in front of us is simple but stark. As a council, we need to make further savings. Local government reorganisation is the unlock that makes that happen. Some of you were at the Finance, Audit and Risk Committee last night. There we were reviewing the medium-term financial strategy for North Herts. By 2028-29, our own financial budget gap could be as high as around 3.4 million. Right now, in the worst of the 2 MTFS scenarios, by 2030, without further savings, we may need to use up to 62% of our own reserves. Finding efficiencies has proven to be critical to balancing the books already without cutting public services for residents. But after years of doing this, it is hard to find more in North Herts alone. Local government reorganisation is therefore critical for us to be able to do this through economies of scale in buying and running services and lower management overheads. So let's look at the figures from the LGR supplement report, pages 35 to 39. They speak for themselves. With 2 unitaries, the 10-year savings are 366 million to 418 million, with a payback 2031 to 2032. With 3 unitaries, the 10-year savings are 181 million to 258 million, with a payback of 2032 to 34. That's 160 million lower. But with 4 unitaries, the 10-year savings are minus 1 million to 134 million, with a payback in 2034 to 39. That is 284 million pounds lower. 2 unitaries have the shortest payback, up to 7 years better, between 160 to 280 million pounds more savings in the good scenario, And importantly, from a risk perspective, a much better bad scenario with minimum savings of 366 million versus losing money. And that's right, under the 4 unitary scenario, it could cost taxpayers more money over the next decade versus doing nothing with the -1 million savings in that scenario. Therefore, councillors, think very carefully when you consider how to vote shortly. The choice is clear. If you want to protect public services, you should vote for 2 unitaries. Councillors, what will you say to your residents to explain why you voted to waste around £300 million or more of their hard-earned council tax money by supporting an overly complex and inefficient 4 unitaries proposal? I urge you to vote for the 2 unitary model. Now and at Cabinet, it has over 3 times the best case savings over 4 unitaries. And I do believe that supporting the 4 unitaries proposal is financial insanity. Save our public services instead. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Councillor Daniel Wright Mason. Daniel.
Thank you, Chair. I think the question that this decision comes down to is, what is the value of representation? Is it really just a bureaucratic afterthought that is worth diluting if it means we can cut a few hundred more jobs, or simply a line on a funding formula spreadsheet? Because I'm afraid to say representation does have a monetary cost. As an estimate, Hertfordshire councils alone have spent more than £10 million facilitating elections in just the last 5 years. The general election is expected to have cost the government more than 100. And for the hypothetical interests of some colleagues, it would likely cost another £140 million to run another EU referendum. My point, colleagues, is not to throw out numbers for the sake of hyperbole, but to reiterate the fact that the role of representatives is not just to pursue cuts and cost savings at the expense of all else. It is also to protect the principle that underpins the very idea of local government, the idea that a nation is complex and that there is no blueprint that can solve all collective problems, that a priority in one area may not be a priority in others. We have priorities for this area, whether that be the Churchgate redevelopment or even projects like the Royston Learner Pool. But if we do go to a model of 2 councils for the whole of Hertfordshire, with a projected 2045 population of nearly 5 times that of current North Herts, will these still be the priorities? Or will our priorities suddenly become a part of a very long queue? Because when we think back to the creation of this council over 50 years ago, there will have been lots of different reasons mulled over by members, as I'm sure Councillor Mantle can attest to. The Councillor Munsters or maybe Chalmers of the day may have joyfully counted the number of jobs that could be counted for savings. Others may have looked at however the government calculated our funding that week, or the more cynical may even have looked at how best they can maximise the political makeup of an area or the type of ward that they might stand in. But jobs have changed and funding formulas recalculated and party alignment shifted and ward boundaries moved. But the one thing that has stayed the same is what the local meant in local government, in how much representation residents have in their local areas. I'm sort of hoping that I'll be around in 50 years, and I'd like to look back and know that I voted for local government, because once it's gone, we won't be getting it back. So I'll be voting for the 4 unitary model tonight, and I would urge colleagues to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Sadly, I won't be around in 50 years. Councillor Tom Tyson. Tom.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to make a few comments as the member for Arbury Ward. And I want to pick up on this 4 unitary option with its case for keeping local government local and small councils that can relate to their places, because I believe that in the case of the villages of Arbury, this proposal completely fails to achieve that. We're told that we should be in an East Hertfordshire unitary because we have links to an A10 corridor, but no one in my ward knows really what that is. And on the other side of this contrived boundary, the central unitary is connected along the A1 corridor. But not us, we'd be on the other side. Even though the A1 runs through Arbury, Baldock services at Junction 10 are in Arbury, and 2 Arbury villages have direct access to the A1. And yet, according to the map on page 253 of the report, the A1 stops at the Arbury border. Yes, and our links to the A10 form, we're told, a stronger tie. For some parts of Arbury, you have to leave Hertfordshire to reach the A10. From my village, there's no public transport to the A10 except the daily bus to Royston, which comes back the next day. Or I could take the train to Royston, but I would have to go to Baldock to catch it. And Royston isn't exactly the A10 corridor itself either. The contradiction of cutting the Arbury villages off from the long-established services in Baldock, Letchworth and Stevenage, whilst claiming that the 4 unitary option fosters a connection to place, is stark and has been oft repeated in this chamber already this evening. In reality, the boundary changes affecting Arbury and other wards in this proposal are not being suggested for altruistic reasons. The needs of our communities are being sacrificed as a matter of political expedience. This is even acknowledged in the strange paragraph in the report that says, whilst the proposals include Arbury Ward being part of the East Unitary Authority in order to balance population numbers, there's also an argument for Arbury to be part of the Central Unitary Authority due to its links to Baldock and the A1 corridor. The point is never returned to, but it is an admission that the border is placed there just to make the numbers add up and not to benefit the residents it affects. So what's it to be? You have a choice. If you believe that Arbury naturally belongs in the same unitary as Baldock and the other towns of North Herts on the A1 corridor, you cannot be in favour of this proposal for 4 unitaries, despite what Councillor Allen has said. And if you do vote for it this evening or next week at Cabinet, you'll be confirming that you don't really care about those residents, despite the massive hypocrisy of claiming to be in favour of an arrangement that claims that boundaries reflect neighbourhood centres and local ties that people use. So I won't be voting for the 4 unitary option. I'm in favour of the 2 unitary option because of the financial resilience and robustness that would offer us in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Next, we have Councillor Ralph Munster. Ralph.
Thank you, Chair. And colleagues, we all appreciate that this is a historic and important moment, not just for our district, but for our county, which will mark a fundamental change in the nature of the relationship between our communities and their council. The current structure of local government is antiquated, bureaucratic, and costly to the taxpayer. It is indeed in desperate need for reform. But I have been dismayed by the impetuous conduct of this government throughout this process, not least because we still lack crucial detail as to the promise of devolution and the funding settlement which could potentially accompany this, something which is much needed in light of the Fairer Funding Review, which means that Hertfordshire County Council now faces a £50 million budget shortfall. My colleagues and I remain of the view that a single unitary authority for Hertfordshire is the best option for the future. However, I am alive to the numbers and the views of which have been raised in this room. There is, however, an option that cannot be allowed to proceed, for it is disruptive, reckless, and irresponsible. Put to one side the clear attempt by the Labour Party to engage in gerrymandering in the 4 unitary option. It is fiscally illiterate. Let us look at the facts. The Central Unitary Authority proposed in this option would have a £22 million budget deficit in its first year. It would contain 26% of Hertfordshire's population, yet 35% of its most deprived areas, putting unsustainable pressure on the services it would require to be delivered to local people. It has the highest number of children looked after, the highest number of children with EHCPs, the highest number of households on housing waiting lists, the highest number of requests for adult social care. I do not know how on earth this option has been allowed to proceed, because it is irresponsible. It will result in more disruption faced by our residents, and it will result in residents paying higher council tax. My group and I have long considered what to do. And we have determined that in order to keep this option off the table, we will reluctantly back the 2 unitary option tonight. And on the 19th of November, this administration has a clear choice. Put the people of North Herts before policy diktats of Labour head office. For tonight, the democratically elected representatives of the people of North Hertfordshire will back 2 unitary authorities. And if Cabinet were not to back the will of Council, then questions would understandably be raised as to Council's confidence in the administration to govern and discharge its responsibilities to deliver for the people of North Hertfordshire.
Thank you, Ralph. I think gerrymander has been a member of most political parties over the last, certainly over my life. Councillor Matt Barnes. Matt.
Thank you, Chair. It seems as though this debate's being framed as between finances on the one side and local representation on the other. And I think both are really important. That's what we're here for. I want to pick up on the representation point because it's easy to look at the proposals and say, okay, 4 unitaries has more councillors, it has a lower ratio of electors to councillors, and think that it's obvious that should make it more representative. But I'm not convinced. I think there's maybe the wrong way of looking at it, and I'll tell you why. First reason is that the average ratio that's presented hides a big variation under the 4 unitary model. Some wards in that model, the ratio is twice as high as other wards. That's not a fair outcome in terms of representation. And I know there's going to be a boundary review, but it creates an imbalance from day one, which the 2 unitary model does not create. It's also quite an academic way of looking at it, these kind of ratio numbers. If you switch it around, look at it from the residents' point of view, what they're interested in is who can help them, how many councillors are representing them, who can they go to when they need help. And in all cases, the 4 unitary model ends up worse than the 2 unitary model. It's a bit counterintuitive, so just let me walk through some examples. Take a 1-member ward today like Ermine. They've got 2 councillors effectively, 1 at district level, 1 at county level. In the 4 unitary model, that's reduced to 1 person. In the 2 unitary model, they have 3 people that they can go to, 3 councillors. Every ward, every division has 3 councillors. A 2-member ward today, like Baldock East, you have 2 district councillors, 1 county councillor, so 3 altogether. In the 4 unitary model, you have 1 councillor. In the 2 unitary model, you have 3 councillors. A 3-member ward, like my own, or Baldock West, for example, 3 district councillors today, 1 county councillor, so 4 people altogether. In the 4 unitary model, you have 2 councillors. In the 2 unitary model, you have 3 councillors. So if you look at it this way, every resident in North Herts is going to be worse off under the 4 unitary model than the 2 unitary model. And I don't think I need to explain to you the benefits of multi-member wards in terms of resilience and teamwork and experience sharing. So my point is really on this one, the democratic argument is not the slam dunk that you think it is. The 2 unitary model is deeply flawed. Sorry, the 4 unitary model is deeply flawed in important ways. And I would argue actually the 2 unitary model provides both a fairer and more effective outcome for residents than the 4 unitary model does on a representative standpoint. And the other thing I want to pick up on is community identity, because that's the other argument that's being made for advocates of the 4 unitary model. But it is obvious to me and everybody here that the transfer of territory that's proposed under the 4 unitary model is solely to make up the numbers and has absolutely nothing to do with communities. To be clear, the A10 corridor in Hertfordshire does not exist. It's made up. It does exist between Royston and Cambridge, and I can tell you from experience that that border makes a big problem. Borders like that create problems. It makes it harder to get things done. But the 4 unitary model creates more of those borders in the wrong places. It cuts off Arbury, as we've talked about, from Baldock. It also cuts off Weston and Sandon from Baldock and Stevenage, and says that they look to Royston, but they don't. I've run out of time. The communities are important, and
Yes,
this treats it as an afterthought.
Yeah,
okay.
Thank you. Steve Jarvis.
Thank you, Chair. So any of these models are going to involve some services that are delivered on a smaller scale. Those that are currently delivered by the County Council, and some that are delivered on a larger scale. And to do that effectively and to represent communities, any of these councils, I would suggest, again, have to think about how they reflect the different identities of the communities within them. Now, both the 2 and the 3 unitary proposals reflect that. But we've heard, and in fact, it's in the document, it says that isn't necessary in the 4 unitary proposal because they're sufficiently close to their community anyway. But I'd like to suggest that the central 4 unitary extends from Hatfield to Hexton. And I don't think Hatfield is very much like Hexton. And the eastern part of North Herts, which would be cut off in the 4 unitary proposal, extends from Royston to Cheshunt. And I don't think they're very similar either. So I think the notion that a 4 unitary solution will deliver some sort of integrated community representation without the sort of neighbourhood arrangements that the other options would also require is fanciful. I mean, we're also told, and several members have already made this point, that this is constructed around communities. Now, I've represented the community of Weston for more than 30 years, but I don't think I've heard anyone there argue that Weston has more connection with Bishop Stortford than it does with Baldock. Now, we can all speculate, as Councillor Munster has, about why these boundaries have been suggested in that way, and looking at a map coloured by the political representation of the current wards and divisions might help you in that respect. But the real issue, the real reason why we should go for 2 rather than 4 is the financial one, because the central 4 unitary will be bankrupt. It will have debts of £100 million in 10 years. The councillors won't be delivering for local people because they'll be replaced by commissioners unless, in fact, even if they do make dramatic cuts in services, because the central unitary won't be able to deliver its statutory responsibilities to care for the elderly and disabled and to keep children safe. It will fail. It is grossly irresponsible to suggest that we should saddle the people of North Herts with a council that is destined to fail to that extent. The 4 unitary is irresponsible to support, and we shouldn't do so. I will be supporting the 2 unitary that will deliver services for people in Hertfordshire and will do so effectively and will enable us to meet their needs to the best extent that we can.
Thank you, Steve. Councillor Emma Fernandez. Emma.
Thanks, Chair. There have been lots of points raised by my colleagues in the debate this evening, some of which I agree with, obviously, and some perhaps not quite so much. It's certainly true that local government representation reform, represents a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to improve services and local democracy for our residents in North Herts. However, as we know, this debate is only advisory. It will not determine the final decision on the preferred way forwards for it. It will be the executive who make the final decision on the preferred proposal for our district. Therefore, political grandstanding, point scoring and looking for catchy sound bites contribute nothing to the debate or the consideration of this important matter. In fact, it only succeeds in feeding into public dissatisfaction with politicians and makes us look self-referential and out of touch with the difficulties they all currently face accessing public services. The main priority should be how to improve and safeguard these services for our residents, not now and in short-term gain, but for the next 50 years. We have an excellent document to consider which offers 3 ways forward, all of which have been deemed viable. However, our residents, by no matter how fine a margin, have expressed some preference for a 4 unitary model of local government reform, and I firmly believe this is the best proposal for North Herts. And realises, and I'm quoting Steve Jarvis here, our shared ambition for high quality services that efficiently meet residents' needs and enable local people to be at the heart of decision making. Only the smaller 4 unitary authority model offers this. The 4 unitary model offers a continuation of the accessible local councillors currently enjoyed by all our residents, which the 2 and 3 unitary model will certainly limit significantly, especially considering only one of our 4 main towns has a town council, and there will therefore be a significant democratic deficit for all the other residents. It will also ensure that services are just that, as Sadie said earlier, local and therefore more personalised and accessible for our residents. I will be supporting the modified 4 unitary model with boundary changes as the best way to deliver services and uphold local democracy. I urge my colleagues to do the same. However, whatever the final decision of the executive, we all need to work together to ensure that we deliver for our residents.
Thank you, Emma. And I'm reminded that whatever the decision of our executive, of course, the ultimate decision will rest with whoever is sitting in the chair of the Secretary of State when the music stops next year. So who knows? Right, Councillor Chris Lucas. Chris.
Thank you, Chair. After careful consideration of all the options over a protracted period of time, it is clear that 2 unitary authorities, not 3 and definitely not 4, offer the most effective, efficient and sustainable model for Hertfordshire's future, and here's why. Let's start with efficiency and financial sustainability. In Hertfordshire, modelling suggests that 2 unitary authorities could save over £50 million per year over the course of the next 5 years in operating costs once fully implemented. If we were to divide Hertfordshire into 3 or 4 unitaries, those savings would shrink significantly. Smaller councils lose economies of scale. They must maintain separate senior leadership teams, HR, finance and digital systems. For example, a 3 unitary model could increase administrative costs by up to 20% and more, and that increases exponentially the larger the more unitary authorities that there are. That means millions lost to bureaucracy rather than invested in local services. Next, let's consider capacity and service resilience. Each new authority under a 2 unitary model would serve roughly 600,000 residents, a size comparable to successful unitaries such as North Yorkshire and Somerset. This scale provides both efficiency and the critical mass needed to deliver complex services like social care, transport, and education effectively. By contrast, 4 unitaries serving roughly 300 to 400,000 people can struggle to maintain specialist teams, respond to emergencies, or invest in long-term infrastructure. The NHS, police, and economic partnerships already operate effectively at a county-wide or dual area scale, and aligning local government boundaries with these systems would strengthen collaboration, not fragment it. And finally, economic strategic planning. Hertfordshire's economy is closely integrated from Rickmansworth in the south to Royston in the north. 2 unitary authorities would allow for coordinated regional growth, shared transport planning, and strategic housing delivery, while still maintaining strong local identity and accountability. 3 or 4 smaller units would compete rather than collaborate, weakening Hertfordshire's voice when bidding for government funding or attracting investment. In conclusion, the case is clear. 2 unitary authorities offer maximum efficiency, strong service capacity, and strategic coherence, whilst without losing local representation. 3 or 4 would mean higher costs, more bureaucracy, and weaker long-term planning. By choosing 2, we choose a model that is large enough to be efficient, yet local enough to care, a model that will deliver for every resident of Hertfordshire now and for future generations to come. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chris. John Claydon. John.
Thank you, Chair. And I just wanted to touch on the consultation. Of course, we've heard this evening that there was a preference for the 4 unitary authority option in North Herts, and therefore I just want to touch on that. Of course, consultation is a great thing. It's a very important plank of local democracy, and we should always, whenever we can, give the public an informed opportunity to explore, to look at the proposals that we plan to take forward and give them the chance to comment and give their input. However, as was discussed at Overview and Scrutiny previously, because of the accelerated timeframe of this whole process, it was not possible to put all the details in front of people at the time that they were being consulted. For example, and very noticeably, given some of the conversation that we've had this evening, the full financial details were not apparent at that time. So people weren't able to make a fully informed decision, and that's not to denigrate them, but it's the nature of the process. Moreover, ultimately, the responses received across Hertfordshire totaled 7,338, if I've added up the numbers in the table correctly, out of a population of 1.2 million, as we know from the various points in the document. So that's a response rate of about 0.6%. Of those, about 7% of the total responses came from council staff and councillors, which is, I think it's fair to say, is an overrepresentation. It's also the case that of those who responded, around or almost a quarter, nearly 25%, said that they knew a lot about local government reorganisation already. I think it's already also not a stretch to say that those people are probably not a typical fraction of the population. Therefore, the response is almost certainly heavily skewed towards those who are already politically active and aware. In North Hertfordshire, 151 people said that they preferred the 4 unitary authority option. 144 people said they preferred the 2 unitary authority option. That's a difference of less than 2 percentage points. I seem to remember a referendum a little while ago, which was made on a fairly narrow margin, and I don't think that was a great outcome ultimately. And I don't think we should be making big decisions on margins that narrow again. So therefore, I think it's important that we don't overstate how big the influence of this consultation should be. And I think ultimately what we know is that people want better services. We don't need to look at this consultation to know that. And in order to deliver those services, the council needs the money to pay for them. And therefore, why on earth will we put ourselves in a position where we are creating a council that from day one is in heavy debt?
Thank you, John. Councillor Nigel Mason. Nigel.
Thank you. A politician once said, "Today is not a day for sound bites, but I feel the hand of history upon our shoulder." Whilst our deliberations today are not of that magnitude, in the history of North Herts Council and of Hertfordshire as a whole, we are at a hugely significant moment. I'll quote a more local politician. "The argument about how many unitaries there should be has always been about cost savings versus local accountability. Dividing Hertfordshire into 2 or 3 unitaries would potentially save more money, but the 4 unitary model gives us the best opportunity to provide local identity, strengthen local decision making, and ensure our communities have a strong and distinct voice." Those words were spoken by Councillor Karina Gander, the Conservative leader of Broxbourne Council, who clearly needs to speak to Councillor Munson more. Having quoted a Conservative, I'll move on to say some nice things about the Liberal Democrats. I found this quote in the Lib Dem policy document. "Decisions should always be taken as locally as possible, where there can be the closest relationship possible between citizens and their representatives." I applaud that statement. And one thing I've always admired about Liberal Democrat councillors I've known is their genuine commitment to the local communities they represent. And yet, here we are. With Lib Dems rising to support the most overly centralised of the proposed council models in front of us, the model that places our residents as far as possible from decision making, that makes their representatives more remote from those they represent. This surely flies in the face of the Lib Dems' core values, one of the Lib Dems' core values, subsidiarity. The 2-council model pitches our residents into a large monolith of an authority, one with a population of over 600,000 people. To get that into context, the combined population of the London boroughs of Islington, Camden and Westminster is about 650,000, and they cover a fraction of the geography of 1/2 of Hertfordshire. North Herts Council has been here for 50 years. These decisions will define the democratic structure and the very nature of our area for perhaps another 50 years. It would be perverse and wrong to predicate that decision on which model might, on paper, save the most money in the first years. What price democracy? Once sold or lost, democracy is rarely recovered. Council, I urge you to go with the 4-council model, supported by the largest number of our North Herts residents. The model that provides the most coherent identity for our new council, that offers us the strongest leverage for economic growth through the tech industries of the A1 corridor, and the model that promises the best level of local representation and democracy for our residents. Support the 4-council model.
Thanks, Nigel. You were doing very well on time, I must say. Right, Councillor Donna Wright. Donna.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, this was never going to be a straightforward decision. You know, the different models have different benefits and challenges, which have been articulated very well in the excellent document. However, I do believe that the 4 unitary model offers the strongest benefit for the people of Hertfordshire, namely better local representation and accountability and connection. Things that residents consistently tell us that they value most. Smaller councils are closer to the communities they serve, and they make decision making more visible and responsive. And this matters. I do also want to address an important issue that can get overlooked, and that is the impact on the estimated 11,000 staff employed by Hertfordshire's councils. Although none of the documents explicitly predict redundancies, let's be realistic. The reorganisation aims to consolidate services, create efficiencies and remove tiers of governance. That inevitably carries risk, particularly for senior and corporate roles. There may also be implications for staff retention. The larger the area you restructure across, the harder it is to redeploy staff into the new organisation, and the greater the risk of failing to retain valuable staff. The human and economic cost of large-scale redundancies could be significant. We just have to look at the recent situation in the NHS with the merger of the integrated care boards, where the failure to factor in the cost of redundancies has created significant issues. Larger scale models, 2 unitaries and to a lesser extent 3, create the greatest economies of scale in corporate functions. That means a higher likelihood of job losses concentrated in those areas. Beyond the financial impact, there is the human cost on those individuals, the risk to service continuity from losing experienced staff and damaging morale. A 4-model unitary mitigates these risks. Smaller authorities mean less aggregation and more opportunity for redeployment within local footprints. It reduces the pressure to strip out layers of management at scale and helps retain local knowledge and expertise. That matters for our workforce and, most importantly, for the communities they serve. Ultimately, this is about values. Do we prioritise maximum economies of scale, or do we prioritise local voice, accountability and the well-being of our staff? For me, Model 4 offers the best balance.
Thank you, Donna. And now Councillor Joe Graziano. Joe?
Thank you, Chair. Democracy is evolving. We know that. Just because something is big or large, as in a service provision, it does not mean it does not work effectively. Services are closer than they ever have been in modern history to our citizens. Accountability starts with each one of us, not with the council top-downing, with many people already accessing national services to communities, available to communities, such as booking appointments on the NHS app or checking results, checking your tax account or government gateway ID, accessing government services to check in NI and pension contributions, engaging with the DWP to biometric data check-in, and the very many other modern things we do today. So it's fair to say we are more connected than ever before. It gives you greater control over our lives. Democracy localism won't change if it's too big. In fact, if I need to connect to a service, I go online or make a telephone call and speak to my councillor should there be an issue. That shouldn't change. It's how we change to meet those needs, and I'm ready. Are you? It then should not make us be afraid or disconnected about being detached to our citizens in a unitary authority. It will enhance us as councillors. I'd like to note, although I feel, and some others do, the way in which the consultation from the start has been remiss of any real impetus. We've heard a few speak of that tonight, and real engagement with me and the communities I serve. I, as some of my colleagues, were in favour of the one unitary authority. The technocrats have decided this not to be. I am in agreement with some. We need to save money. We need to get good value for money for services for our electorate. Services will work more efficiently over a 2 unitary authority. 3 or 4 unitary council model appears to be cumbersome, fraught with issues of identity and questionable financials. People on the doorstep want their bins to be collected, pay less tax, and get decent services being delivered. Residents want to know who to contact or speak to if there's a problem, feel respected and valued, that their issues are being addressed, listened to, and that the communities feel supported and enhanced whilst modernising democracy. I will be supporting a 2 unitary authority. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that, Joe. There's a point of clarification I'd like to make on that, so I'll ask the officer to make that.
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify for anyone watching at home, or indeed those in the chamber, it was the collective decision of the 11 leaders of the Hertfordshire councils to withdraw the single unitary option. It was not an officer decision, as was just suggested. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks for clarifying that. Our next speaker, Councillor Tim Johnson. Tim.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, following today's frankly terrific decision to get rid of the PCCs, I'm tempted to say I'm looking forward to 12 years' time when district councils are reinstated and unitary authorities abolished. On a more serious note, Mr. Smithson's comments at the start of this debate were spot on to my mind. 4 unitaries in a nutshell is a wrong decision. I'd also just like to record my view that the legal limitations on full council are clearly here, and accept completely that this is a cabinet decision. But I disagree with it, and I think the law should be changed, and decisions of this magnitude moving forward should be made by full council. Be that as it may, unitary authorities are coming, and my opinion is we should absolutely follow the two authority split and ditch the other options. Excuse me. To go to 4, to my mind, not only affects boundaries, as Mr. Smithson so eloquently explained, but is somewhat of a halfway house between what we have now and the more sensible 2 option. 2 will simplify structures, make financial savings, have the right number of ward councillors, as Councillor Barnes has pointed out and has been glossed over by others, and above all, give the best service to our residents. I've got to say that I find it a bit rich that barbs are being thrown about local community representation by councillors from a party that is imposing unitary authorities on our residents at government level. I will enthusiastically be voting for the 2 option and encourage Cabinet to do the same. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Councillor Vijay Pupalasingham, Vijay.
Thanks, Chair. So we've heard tonight 2 broad headlines, if I can put it that way, upon which members appear to be making their decision on which option they would support. We've got on one side, broadly from the Liberal Democrats and the Conservative colleagues, they're broadly focusing on the financial elements in support of a 2 unitary. And while Labour colleagues are approaching this from a people first and a community first perspective. And I appreciate and recognise the work that has gone into these proposals, but it's the financial modelling that I would like to focus on that's underpinning the options, and just highlight that potentially there is some inherent bias in the way that that modelling has been presented in favour of the 2 unitaries. Now, only if we were to take the points in support for the 2 unitaries being put forward by members at their highest, I'd highlight that members have potentially not factored in the basis of assumptions which have predicated the modelling and are potentially presenting the appearance of a better financial frame than in reality exists here. Now, looking through those supplementary reports and the appendices, appears that the presentation of those financial assumptions don't treat all the models equally, and what appears on the face of it neutral and technical actually embeds somewhat of a structural advantage to the 2 authority configurations. So I'll just start by outlining just highlight some of those examples. Now, even at the outset, the frame of the discussion tells us that the 2 unitary model delivers the highest level of savings and the fastest payback period. And it's stating that as a conclusive fact before any of the analysis and without the concrete evidence behind it, because these are all predicated on assumptions. Second, when we look at the outline of transition costs, again, somewhat indicated from pages 129 to 136, they're held as constant across all the options, despite the reality that smaller configurations are going to have proportionally lower costs in line with their size. The aggregation costs are being weighted equally with the allusion to economies of scale and are being used to shelter the 2 unitary model, whereas a more appropriate range of assumptions would be representative and should also have commensurately weighted the disaggregation costs more in favour of the 4 unitary model. So, taking from that, these flat rate of assumptions would inflate the comparative costs for the 3 and the 4 unitary models. And again, the efficiency models somewhat alluded to in pages 189 and 190, they allow for economies of scale to grow with size, but equally fail to factor in the additional coordination costs of larger bodies. So those choices make it look as if that regardless of the operational complexities, the 2 unitary might be better. Now, again, these are all assumptions which are being used to support the proposals, but they're not fact. And I'd suggest that colleagues be careful in taking them as fact without further scrutiny. And then crucially, the omission of the fair funding model is a crucial factor which inherently unduly magnifies the financial viability of risks on some parts of the 4 unitaries. So I'll just leave it with that, Chair.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks, Vijay. Thank you. We've a few more coming, so keep the barracking down to a whisper, please. Councillor Sam Collins. Sam.
Thanks, Chair. That was a surprising speech we just heard. It was a little bit more exciting than I heard, because this isn't exactly an exciting topic for the public. It's not coming up on the doorsteps massively about where the borders are or local government reorganisation. The public in North Hertfordshire want to know when their bins are being collected and why they're not being collected if they haven't been collected yet, Dom. And that's what people care about. This is an important matter, and we've got to do it right, of course. But the Liberal Democrats believe in evidence-based decision-making. Consultation from 0.6 residents of Hertfordshire isn't evidence-based decision-making. That's just a guess. You know, it's nothing. It's cancelled itself out as being irrelevant. And then you take a look at some of the things we've just heard. Now, we're clearly having an argument here about a 2 unitary authority or 4 unitary authority. And there's a clear line. Now, the Liberal Democrats also believe in good local services. That's part of localism. That's part of listening to what the local people want, fixing the potholes, which seems to have gone quite well recently. I can't think what's changed at the county council. But that's what people care about. And that's what the Liberal Democrats care about, doing a good job for the people we represent. Doing a good job for the people we represent doesn't mean starting off millions of pounds in debt as a new council and immediately ending up in some sort of Northamptonshire style situation. We don't want that. That's rubbish for residents. And they're not going to get their rubbish collected if there's £22 million of debt or whatever numbers you care to believe. It's a huge deficit. And to say that somehow this report is biased is quite a claim against the officers who put it together. A great effort. I mean, that's quite an allegation. And I'm not sure if the councillor wants to stick with that one. But nonetheless, the Liberal Democrats just believe in doing what's right for our residents. I don't think this should be a political matter. This should be based on science and evidence and just calculations. And we've heard really eloquently explained that going for 4 unitaries across Hertfordshire will just not be very good for the people in North Hertfordshire. And we had a brilliant opening statement from a member of the public. Congratulations on that, because I think that summed up the localised level of stuff or how it affects a small village. That's what the Liberal Democrats believe in. So to say that we don't care about localism, we don't care about people, we do. We care about listening to what the people want and acting on it. £22 million in debt, you're not going to be able to take much action, are you?
Thanks, Councillor Ian Albert. Ian.
Yes, thanks, Chair. And firstly, I'll say how I miss my late colleague and friend Judy Billing tonight. I think she would have loved this debate. In so many ways, the paper sets out the pros and cons of the different options. And I have to say, I do wonder whether he really add anything by indicating one of them to Cabinet tonight, or indeed Cabinet indicating that. The evidence is there in some detail in front of us. So whilst in many respects I would prefer us not to actually have an option, that's, I think, not where we are this evening. Now, I think I would say to Councillor Munster and Councillor Jarvis, I don't often link them in the same sentence, that they should probably stay in a little more, because I've been really boring this week. I've eschewed some of the programmes I've watched and have watched the meetings of the other councils. And when you hear, obviously, some contributions this evening, you might actually think that no Liberal Democrat would ever dream of having anything other than 2, or a Conservative would dream of anything other than 1. But that's clearly not the case. I've heard all of those contributions, including from some Cabinet members in the Liberal Democrats on the County Council, and indeed Cabinet members in, for example, of Conservatives down in Broxbourne. There is a difference of opinion here, and I think we need to recognise that. I fully support unitary authorities. I'll certainly be arguing for the principle of a town council or an equivalent neighbourhood committee with powers in each area. Localism is important. Now, for me, while there is an attraction of 2 unitary authorities, I think it would just be huge. The North Ore to Nut Hampstead thing is a bureaucratic nightmare, frankly. And we won't even necessarily get, they're proposing 115 councillors when the likely maximum is less than 100. You could see 3 as a compromise option, but I think it delivers unequal sized populations. And I have to say, I don't think that they're actually having elections, and I think we would lose the chance of bringing our garden cities together, for example, within that option. But I think what I would then look to is the 4 unitary authority option. Now, I think a smaller council will be more responsive and accessible. I think it will deliver in a way that I think the other options don't. Yes, I have some reservations. I do think actually, and I would still hope that we can actually include Arbury and Weston and Sandon in that central option. But finally, I'll just finish quickly around the funding issues. I do think that actually in looking at this option, that the fair funding review will benefit us, which we have higher areas of deprivation in that central area. There's going to be a significant reduction in pensions contributions across the county. That will also help. So in conclusion, I think while I recognise there are challenges, risks and uncertainties, I'll be supporting the 4 unitary authority. It can deliver best the balanced local accountability alongside financial sustainability. And I think finally to say, if we fix on cost, I think we lose on quality. That's why I'll be supporting the 4 unitary authority option.
Thank you, Ian. Councillor Stephen Patmore. Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. In my view, as many across this chamber here tonight, a 2 unitary structure is the best option for the residents of North Hertfordshire. Firstly and foremost, this is about delivering better services for local residents. A 2 unitary structure provides scale and capacity we need to deliver essential services efficiently and consistently. Things like highways, social care, education and planning. 2 larger authorities can coordinate these services strategically, avoiding the duplication and confusion that would inevitably come with 4 smaller councils. Secondly, a 2-division split represents a better value for money, fewer administrative bodies, meaning fewer chief executives, fewer sets of offices, and fewer overlapping departments, freeing up funds to go directly to frontline services. At a time when every pound matters, we cannot afford to create unnecessary bureaucracy. The 4 unitary option, by contrast, would divide Hertfordshire into smaller, weaker authorities. That fragmentation would not only drive up cost, but also create inconsistency and inefficiency across the county. Residents could see different standards of service depending on which side of the boundary they live on, something we must avoid. We have to think about the stability and transition. Moving to 2 authorities is a manageable, practical step that minimises disruption. Creating a 4-entity new councils would mean 4 new administrations, 4 leadership teams, 4 sets of systems, all at great cost, confusion and risk of service continuity. A 2-division model offers the best balance between local accountability and strategic strength. It delivers efficiency, well-coordinated service, saves money, maintains community links, and gives North Hertfordshire a strong, united voice for the future. The 4-way option, however, would weaken local government, fragment our resources, and quite frankly, would be damaging for our residents. So for the sake of efficiency, community cohesion and long-term interests for local people, I firmly support the 2-division model, and I urge others in this chamber to do the same.
Thank you, Stephen. Claire Winchester. Claire.
Thank you, Chair. It's easy to get bogged down in detail. I just want to reflect on the reasons why we're doing this in the first place. We were told that the urgent reasons to move to a unitary model were to save money to reinvest in service delivery and to simplify the relationship between residents and councils such that our residents have a clear view of who delivers their services and how to engage with them. And furthermore, we were assured of a respect for local ward or division boundaries and for the enduring connection we have between our rural communities and our market towns. The 2 unitary model offers simplicity, an elegant solution, contiguous borders, boundaries with policing and health, making cohesive strategic planning possible. Unitaries that are large enough to make their own arrangements, contracts and partnerships with suppliers for waste, leisure or other services. In briefings, prior to this meeting, we heard that the 4 model could mean each of the little unitaries joining forces with different neighbours to make contracts big enough to count. So we in North Herts, as part of the central unitary, could end up doing shared leisure with Eastern or waste with North West, and who knows what with authorities elsewhere. Hardly the clean, clear accountability that we want to convey for residents. The boundary changes we've discussed at length, and I cannot see a justification for hiving off part of our district and giving it to Cambridgeshire, taking Arbury away from Baldock, or splitting communities that have functioned well for decades, if not centuries. I cannot see the justification for that additional complexity. And so let's not try and make silk purses out of the 4 model. Even with the boundary changes, it's still a pig's ear. And if the worst thing we can say about the 2 unitary model is that people might feel a long way from their representation, then I would point to the solution we already use, our town forums and rural committees. Clearly, they can be strengthened, and we can do so in a targeted, locally sensitive and appropriate way. It's not going to be hard or new, and we are going to need to do it, whatever option we are given. Local councillors will still be embedded in their communities. They're not going to disappear. So for these 3 reasons, financial sustainability that we've covered, delivery, simplicity and respect for our communities, I'll be voting for the 2 unitary option.
Thank you, Claire. Councillor Ian Mantle. Ian?
Thank you. Listening to all the debate tonight, I've been very concerned. We seem to be focusing on service delivery. This isn't the purpose of local government. Local government is to make decisions about the area. How we teach a class in school is really not the local council's business. Nor indeed is making sure they've got enough buildings to perform in. What we should be looking at is what's the best way of actually influencing what happens. Local government is nothing if it isn't a local government with the ability to do things actually differently from your neighbour. And for that reason, I think that the for council option means that people's ideas have much more chance of actually penetrating through the fog and to get into a situation where the council supports them and implements them. So I should be supporting it and thinking again about 2040. Let's think, what do we want our local councils to be doing in 2040? If it's just delivering services, then I think something's failed. If it's actually being imaginative and changing things, then that's what it should be doing.
Thank you, Ian. In 2040, we'll probably be debating local government reorganisation. Councillor Emma Rowe. Emma.
Thank you, Chair. I'm speaking tonight as the elected member for Baldock West to raise serious concerns about the proposed 4 unitary split. And while I understand the intention behind the proposal, I believe it risks doing real harm to the communities that I represent. The most immediate issue is how the proposal of a 4 split separates Baldock from the villages that form part of its natural community, as the local resident from Ashwell articulated so clearly earlier this evening. Under the current proposal, places like Ashwell, Bygrave, Clothall, Weston, Radwell will be placed in a different unitary area from Baldock. They're being split not from each other, but from the main town they rely on for schools, transport, community groups and everyday services. These aren't just lines on a map, they're practical connections that people depend upon every day. Breaking them will make joined-up delivery harder and weaken networks that hold our area together. It risks creating 2 tiers in a community that has existed for thousands of years. Financially, the proposal is even more worrying. There's a massive funding black hole at the heart of this model. Fair funding hasn't come through, and without a substantial new settlement, the new central authority will be running on fumes. Even with a decent settlement, it's likely only statutory services would be covered. The discretionary services our communities rely upon will be stripped back to bare bones. With no financial headroom, any future shock, rising care demands and costs plus inflation will push this unitary into failure. Some people argue that the 4 split unitary is the only way to guarantee strong local representation, and that's simply not true, as Councillor Barnes mentioned earlier. The two unitary model, for example, while not perfect, includes neighbourhood area committees with delegated powers. Local decisions could still be made locally. So the idea that only the four unitary model offers local voice is misleading and clearly part of a partisan agenda. And good representation doesn't come from the size of the authority, it comes from the quality of its councillors. I know there are county councillors, Ian Albert, Ruth, Alistair Willoughby and many others, we're short on time, across this chamber who represent large county divisions and still serve their communities with the same dedication and effectiveness as they do in their smaller district wards. If we put forward good local candidates invested in their communities, good representation will follow. So I urge colleagues not to support the four unitary model in its current form. It breaks up natural communities, it's financially unsound, and it's built on flawed assumptions about representation. We need a structure that keeps Baldock and its surrounding villages together, protects the services people actually use, and gives councillors the tools to do their jobs well, regardless of the size of that unitary. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. It would appear that we have no more general speakers, so I'm going to go back to Daniel. Did you want to? You reserved your right.
Thank you, Chair. I've attended well over 300 hours of meetings on local government reorganisation in the past year, and I want to thank officers from North Herts District Council, Hertfordshire County Council, and all of our other authorities for the phenomenal time and effort they've put into this work. I'm also proud of the way this document has been written. It's truly cross-party. It's been supported by Conservative, Green, Labour, Liberal Democrat and Joint Administration Councils. Hertfordshire has worked together. Local government reorganisation isn't just about maps and boundaries. It's about people. It's about making sure that every resident has a council that understands their community, their challenges and their hopes for the future. That's why I believe the four unitary model is the right choice for North Hertfordshire and for Hertfordshire as a whole. When residents were asked what they wanted, both on the survey and in person, the clear preference was for four unitary councils. They chose this option because it keeps power local, in the hands of the people who know their communities best. They told us they want decisions made here, not miles away by people who've never met or walked our high streets or spoken to our residents. The four unitary model gives us that closeness. It lets us build councils that reflect real communities. Look at the A1 corridor, the East Coast Main Line, our hospitals, colleges and universities. These are the lifelines that tie North Hertfordshire to our neighbours and will tie a central unitary together. And our governance needs to reflect that. It's not just about politics, it's about what's best for residents. Conservative Broxbourne, Liberal Democrat Dacorum, and just now, Green-led East Herts have all backed the four unitary option, proving that when it comes to local democracy, we can find common ground and use common sense. Because ultimately, this is about fairness, about representation and opportunity. Councils that are local enough to care and strong enough to deliver. And for representation, four will be based on wards, which have much smaller footprints than divisions. So councillors will be closer to their community in a four unitary than they would with a two. As leader of North Hertfordshire District Council, I believe our communities deserve nothing less. The four unitary model is practical, fair, and rooted in the places we serve. Let's choose what's right for our residents, for our democracy, and for the future of Hertfordshire as a whole. I'm for four.
Thank you, Daniel. And finally, I'll come back to Laura.
Thank you, Chair. I want to begin by expressing my sincere thanks to all the officers and to Daniel as our leader for their extraordinary efforts in getting us to this point. Managing this process while keeping the essential services running is no small feat, and your dedication deserves our recognition. Tonight, we stand at a crossroads that demands more than just individual effort. It requires genuine collaboration. It is truly remarkable that 11 authorities, each with distinct remits and political perspectives, have come together to develop a single joint proposal. This level of cooperation has not been achieved in all other areas of the country, and everyone involved in Hertfordshire should be commended. The proposal document paints an inspiring and achievable vision for our whole county, and I'm very excited for the future. It's also important to note that all 11 authorities agree that all 3 options before us are viable, deliverable, and all offer real benefits to our residents. We've been presented with a wealth of facts, figures, and data. Every option is economically viable. Every option is based on workable population sizes and geographies. And importantly, through both the survey and the public meetings we held, residents of North Hearts made their preference clear. They favour the 4 unitary option. I will not set that aside, as some have advocated this evening. I intend to honour residents' wishes, and I encourage each of you to do the same. Of course, in any complex decision-making process, differences of opinion are not just inevitable, they are welcomed and they are essential. And I respect the passion with which colleagues have spoken this evening. But I want to pick up on a couple of things. We've heard about representation. Both 2 and 3 unitary authorities are based on county boundaries. The ward that I represent is geographically in Stevenage and is represented at county level as an add-on to a Royston county area, split from the main town that we rely on. My residents insist that we overturn this long-standing lack of representation. The process is going fast. We are making decisions based on the best available data, and assumptions have to be made. However, there is asymmetric weighting in the assumptions. It's clear that the disaggregation has been costed, but it is not clear that the aggregation has been factored in, and that favours a 4. So basing the decision solely on the financial analysis tonight is problematic. We simply don't have all the data. But let us remember our responsibility to the legacy of North Hearts Council, a legacy built on 50 years of success. In just 2.5 years, the district will give way to something new, something we have the opportunity to make even better. Local government reorganisation in tandem with devolution goes far beyond boundary changes. It gives us the ability not only to streamline, but also to reimagine and reshape services driven by what matters to local people. The recommendations and the final proposal we submit are not the end of the process, they are the beginning. Whatever is ultimately decided next summer for Hertfordshire by the Minister, every single one of us must commit to working together to ensure a successful transition. I urge all members to join me in putting aside differences and working together for the greater good, because that is our duty to residents and that is our legacy. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Can I thank everybody for keeping to time and keeping it reasonably well-tempered as well? Not that I thought you'd do anything different. We will now move to the votes. I'm going to read out recommendation 2.1 again because I missed a little bit out. So I'm going to read that out and then we will vote on that using the electronic voting buttons. So the recommendation 2.1, that Council notes the content of this report and the draft Hertfordshire submission document at appendices A to E, which forms the proposed collective submission to government on local government reorganisation. We've had a proposer on that, Laura, and a seconder, Daniel. So can we now move to the vote? Sorry. Oh, Ruth, I'm so sorry.
Can I request a recorded vote, please?
2-1. On 2-1?
On 2-2.
2-2. Yeah.
Sorry. Am I premature? Sorry.
You were. You getting overexcited there, huh? Okay, so 2.1 is an electronic vote. So can you please vote on 2.1 now, please?
That motion is carried, Chair.
Thank you very much. Recommendation 2.2 will be conducted via a manual roll call of members. The committee member and scrutiny manager, slip of the tongue, scrutiny manager will announce members' names, lock the doors, will announce members' names in alphabetical order, and you will be required to announce which of the 4 options you will be voting for as your preference, and then we'll announce the result. Do you want me to read through the whole of 2.2 again? Yes, indeed.
Thank you, Chair. May I ask if you are asking us to say A, B, C, or if you're asking us to say 2, 3, or 4? Because some people may get confused.
Well, you could say both, I suppose.
I was going to go over both before, whichever way you want.
Okay. So let's make it clear that Council indicates its support for a preferred option to be considered by Cabinet as part of its deliberations on the 19th of November. A is submit the proposal and identify the 2 unitary option as preferred. B is submit the proposal and identify the modified 3 unitary option as preferred and request that the Secretary of State formally modify the proposal by agreeing boundary changes as set out in the proposal. C is submit the proposal and identify the modified 4 unitary option as preferred and request etc., etc. And D is submit the proposal without identifying a preferred option. So A is 2, B is 3, C is 4, and D is no comment. So I'm going to hand over.
Is that clear, Chair?
Well, if you're not clear, say it before you vote, for goodness sake.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so when I call your name, which will be in alphabetical order of surname, please indicate your vote for option A, 2 unitary, B, 3 unitary, C, 4 unitary, or D, no preference. As the Chair said, if you are unsure, please let me know and I'll repeat those when we come to you. Councillor Ian Albert.
Option C, 4 unitary authorities.
Thank you. Councillor Amy Allen.
C4.
Thank you. Councillor Daniel Allen.
C4.
Councillor Matt Barnes.
2A.
Thank you. Councillor Tina Bartwas.
2 unitary authorities.
Thank you. Councillor Sadie Billing.
C4.
Thank you. Councillor Ruth Brown.
A2.
Thank you. Councillor Kathy Brown-John.
C4.
Councillor David Chalmers.
A2 unitaries.
Councillor John Claydon.
A, 2 unitaries.
Thank you. Councillor Sam Collins.
A2, please. 2 unitaries.
Thank you. Councillor Mick Debenham.
C4.
Thank you. Councillor Emma Fernandez.
C4.
Thank you. Councillor Joe Graziano.
2A, 2 unitaries.
Thank you. Councillor Dominic Griffiths.
2A unitaries.
Thank you. Councillor Keith Hoskins.
D, no preference.
Yep. Thank you. Councillor Steve Jarvis.
2A.
Thank you. Councillor Tim Johnson.
2A.
Councillor Chris Lucas.
2A.
Thank you. Councillor Sarah Lucas.
C4.
Thank you. Councillor Ian Mantle.
C4.
Thank you. Councillor Nigel Mason. Thank you. Councillor Brian E. May. Did you want to say that? A2 was that? So, yeah. Councillor Caroline McDonnell.
Option A2.
Thank you. Councillor Michael Muir.
A2.
Thank you. Councillor Ralph Munzer. Councillor Lisa Nash.
Yeah, A2.
Councillor Sean Nolan.
Option C.
Thank you. Councillor Stephen Patmore.
A2.
Councillor Louise Peace.
A2.
Councillor Vijaya Pupalasingham.
Option C.
Thank you. Councillor Sean Prendergast.
2A.
Thank you. Councillor Martin Prescott.
A2.
Thank you. Councillor Emma Rowe.
Option A, 2 unitaries.
Thank you. Councillor Tom Tyson.
Option A.
Thank you. Councillor Paul Ward.
Option A, 2.
Thank you. Councillor Laura Williams.
C4.
Thank you. Councillor Alistair Willoughby.
C4.
Councillor Claire Winchester.
A2.
Thank you. Councillor Dave Winstanley.
C4.
Councillor Donna Wright.
C4.
Thank you. And Councillor Daniel Wright Mason.
To end the game of battleships, C4.
Thank you, Chair. Therefore, there were in total 24 votes for option A, 0 votes for option B, 17 votes for option C, and 1 vote for option D. Therefore, the recommendation, the motion is that the council indicates its support for a preferred option to be considered by Cabinet as part of its deliberations on the 19th of November, and that is to submit the proposal and identify the 2 unitary option as preferred. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thanks for conducting the vote, and that concludes our business for the evening. Thank you all for being here. Just to remind you that our next full council meeting is scheduled for the 4th of December.